I'm Melissa.
And I'm Lee, and we are busy mums, company founders, and all-round early learning nerds. Welcome to our podcast, Growing Little Humans.
Kids aren't born with a user manual, so each week we'll try and cover many topics that you guys encounter and worry about each and every day while you're raising your little humans.
Okay, so today we're welcoming Maree Knock on the pod. Maree has an undergrad degree in human movement with a specialism in health promotion from Deakin University in Australia, and she has a diploma in education from P to 12 from La Trobe University in Australia as well. So Maree has a passion for kitchen garden, and we at the Wishing Tree have connected with Maree, and she is going to be working with us to deliver kitchen gardens at the Wishing Tree because a big focus for us is about building the whole child. So for our work with Maree, she'll be supporting us with nutrition because some of our children do not know that a carrot does not come from the supermarket, but indeed comes from the ground. So today we're welcoming Maree, who has 15 years experience working in Australia, and now recently she has been working in the UAE, and she has been doing workshops with adults and children on composting and edible gardening. So Maree, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mel. Thanks for that introduction.
So Maree, we've just talked about that the Wishing Tree is going to be delivering a program with a kitchen garden. So you can just tell me what is a kitchen garden?
So essentially a kitchen garden is a designated garden space where we grow food. And so that can be in pots or planters, it could be an in-ground garden bed, or it could be a combination of all of those or some of those. And a kitchen garden is really filled with lots of beautiful edible plants, lots of herbs, lots of vegetables, lots of fruits, and lots of flowers intermingled amongst all of those beautiful edibles to promote a healthy garden.
Excellent. And so how does that benefit our children, having a kitchen garden?
Wow. So there's so many benefits of a kitchen garden. A kitchen garden is a really fun place for children to play, learn and grow. And there are so many benefits, not only on physical development, but also mental health and well-being. And so if we talk about physical development, gardening has a potential to really enhance and develop the gross motor skills, so using lots of those large muscle groups in the body. So through activities such as bending, lifting, digging, reaching, squatting, all those sorts of activities that engage those, those arm and muscle, leg muscles. But also there's so many activities and tasks in the garden that require fine motor skills. So things like sowing seeds, even seed harvesting, when we take the food into the kitchen. Children might be involved in things like plucking leaves from stems, but also a whole host of skills that they learn to do with their hands, such as, cutting, chopping and using lots of other different utensils. Yeah, so it really enhances, those fine and gross motor skills for children, which are so important.
Great, hitting on some of those developmental milestones.
And those sorts of skills, particularly the fine motor skills, they really help to develop the hands and the muscles required for writing and drawing, using scissors, but also skills for independence, such as buttoning up their own clothes, using zips, tying shoelaces, and so on. Yeah.
So a lot of skills that are going to help with children transitioning to school.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're experiencing those sorts of activities using really hands-on, really supportive, really amazing, nourishing sort of skills for developing their bodies.
Okay, so you've sort of spoken a little bit about digging and some cutting, et cetera, et cetera. So is that safe? I mean, how do we know that children, that's safe what children are doing in the garden? Obviously, we've got supervision. I know that children will be heavily supervised while they're working in the kitchen garden, but there's a lot of talk about risky play. Would that come into sort of play when we're talking about kitchen gardens?
Yes, absolutely. So it's really important to consider the sorts of tools that we're offering children and that we're providing for them to use in the kitchen and garden. So rather than providing them full, large adult sorts of tools like shovels and knives and things like that, obviously we scale those down to be a suitable size for the children to be able to use safely, so they're not quite so heavy and cumbersome. But it's also about supporting staff to really understand and learn how to use tools safely. You know, for example, digging in the garden to support, a healthy back. There's a certain way that's really encouraged that you can use a shovel, and so it's about encouraging staff to pass that knowledge on to children on how to be safe with tools.
Yeah. And I think that's probably helping kids as well with communicating with one another and sharing and taking turns and all those, whole child social skills
absolutely,
as well.
Definitely. The other thing in terms of safety in the garden, obviously they're going to be consuming a lot of plants in the garden, so it's about encouraging the children or really passing on that knowledge of what is safe and unsafe to eat, that they must ask before they, particularly if they're unsure, before they put something into their mouth. But it's also about making sure that we don't put, toxic or harmful plants into that learning space. I remember when I was working here in Abu Dhabi in a nursery school, and the moment I set foot on the property to check out the garden, I noticed some plants that I knew were toxic in the play space, as well as some indoor plants that were in sort of the foyer area, and I was quickly able to say, they're actually not
if they're ingested, or if
absolutely if they're ingested. Often some plants, have sap that can really be harmful and dangerous, particularly if you ingest it. Wow. And children, as we know, are really quite inquisitive, so they're more likely to put something into their mouth. So it's really important that we make sure that we're putting safe plants into their learning space.
And having, I guess, those conversations about what's happening in the kitchen garden is not happening in the normal playground or wherever you are.
Yeah.
Okay,
but it's also giving them just exposure to what can and can't be eaten as well.
Okay.
The other things in terms of safety, obviously in this region it's incredibly hot, so just generally the heat factor can pose quite a risk. I almost got heat stroke one day setting up a compost system. I was really excited and enthusiastic to set it up in I think it was September, and it was just too hot and I overdid it, and I very quickly realised that when it is hot you have to limit your time in the garden. But we can also put things like shade sails over the top of a garden to make it a lot more safe and enjoyable for children.
And I think sometimes letting children enjoy the kitchen garden or the gardens first thing in the morning or maybe at the end of the day when the heat of the day is out of the way.
Yeah. And you're not really going to be encouraging enjoyable time in the garden if you're putting them out there in the middle of the day and it's hot and they're sweaty. So it's really important to make sure that they go out first thing in the morning and, like you said, in the afternoon,
and have an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, definitely.
So what I was going to say is we just talked about before a little bit about some children have never seen a carrot outside the supermarket. So how does a kitchen garden promote children to try different foods and try healthy foods? Because I know some parents will come to me and they'll say they'll only want to have chicken nuggets and chips. So a lot of the time is how does that encouragement of what they're seeing grown onto their plate encourage that sort of to happen?
So a kitchen garden can obviously be incredibly powerful in changing food habits and also giving children those sorts of experiences that they can then carry through the rest of their life. And so generally what we find here in this region is that the vast majority of our food is flown in from hundreds, if not thousands of kilometres away. And so that has some, downfalls, I guess, in terms of food nutrition, but also how fresh and tasty it is as well, because often produce is harvested when it's underripe, but also it might also be harvested quite some time ago. So, often the food that children are exposed to is not the freshest and not the most nutritious that it could be. So when we are able to grow our own food and children are able to experience harvesting the food and bringing it into the kitchen, they're going to be tasting really beautiful, fresh, seasonal produce, and hopefully it's been grown in a way where it hasn't had any chemicals or pesticides applied. So it's going to be a lot healthier for the children to consume. consume.
And I think a piece of that is communicating that with parents as well. Like they're trying this at the wishing tree. They can try that when they're at home.
Absolutely.
And they can see, like you said, fruit and vegetables that they don't usually see at home. Try some different things.
Definitely. So just a few things that come to mind in saying that is that when you often plant a kitchen garden, you have such a wide variety of things that you can grow. So it's generally a lot wider than the produce that you might see or find in a supermarket.
Okay.
And so we can grow things like rainbow carrots or chard with
What's a rainbow carrot?
Rainbow carrot. So
sounds fascinating.
So a lot of children particularly, have never even seen a carrot grow, let alone understand that carrots don't just come in orange. You know, that you can actually grow purple, red, you can grow white and yellow carrots. Some carrots you can grow that are purple on the outside and orange on the inside. So it can be a really exciting way for children to get to see their different fruits and veggies grow, but also experience tasting lots of different varieties that they wouldn't normally. And the other thing is that when children grow something, they're more likely going to try eating it because they've seen how much time and effort, how much patience, how much love has gone into growing the produce, and so they're more likely going to want to try it. But not only that, it's really amazing to then be able to bring that food into the kitchen and just create some beautiful, nourishing dishes with the help of the carers and the teachers. But then to be able to share it with their friends is really, really powerful.
Absolutely.
I'm just thinking back to a little boy who by the end of the first year of the kitchen garden, he was drinking full cups of kale and banana smoothie, whereas initially when we first started the program, he wouldn't even put the cup to his mouth. But, sitting there and watching all of his peers really, try something new and to, just be a part of what was going on.
I think that's a really good part of it, just saying, try something new. So even if they don't like it, at least they've given it a try. I think that's a really powerful piece.
I kind of have the saying of, just give it a little lick, a little nibble, or a little bite to begin with. And, really support and encourage the children to just give something a little try without that pressure of having to eat a full something. And over time,
hopefully it grows.
Yeah, hopefully it will grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure, yeah.
So there's a lot of talk about sustainability and STEM and obviously kitchen gardens really links into that. So how does having a kitchen garden, how would that benefit a child's overall education?
Yeah. So gardening is an incredibly rich source of inspiration that can incorporate all of the different learning areas within an educational setting and an early learning centre. And so we touched on the physical development and things like that. But gardening can really enhance literacy as well through the use of literature that we might offer the children. So lots of books and lots of stories and things like that. It really enhances a child's vocabulary when they're out in the garden and they're using, language to do with the garden. They're increasing their vocabulary. They're communicating with their friends. They're enjoying conversation about what they're seeing, what they're observing in the garden.
Absolutely.
And to see the joy and excitement, it just really promotes lots of language. But as you touched on, gardening is an incredibly important task for children to be involved in, particularly now with the issues of climate change and a changing world. Yep. It's really important that children understand issues of sustainability, that what we do with our waste, and even in an early learning centre we can really introduce concepts such as composting at a really early age to get children to understand that humans are really good at wasting things and throwing things away that could otherwise be utilised. And particularly when it comes to growing vegetables, when you're turning your food waste into amazing compost that then goes back into the garden. They get to see that closed loop cycle, which is so important for children to learn. They also get to understand that reciprocity, that when we give to nature, that when we care for something, we get it back in through obviously
Amazing.
being able to harvest and consume beautiful, nutritious, amazing produce.
Yeah. And it'd be great to see children then go take that home, and then they can do composting at home as well, and then they can
definitely
follow out just outside of the centre as well.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
That's really important.
And you touched a little bit on the topic of STEM learning. And so what STEM learning is basically is integrating mathematics and also science to really provide children with lots of rich learning experiences. So in the garden, things like life cycles of plants and insects that might be in the garden, things like understanding where to plant different plants in the garden, taking into consideration the season and the weather and things like that, but also even things like measuring in space, spacing out seeds and plants and things like that. And then obviously in the kitchen there's a whole host of science sort of skills and things to cover in terms of measuring and weighing and, you know, just the aspect of cooking itself.
I don't think I've ever taught a student that didn't like working in the kitchen.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just such a fantastic, you know, and I think, like you said, the communication, having those discussions, and then how they go off and document that, what they've done. That it looked like that, then it looks like that, and now this is what it looks like, and they can showcase that as well.
And it's a much more rich experience rather than, you know, learning about a life cycle on a worksheet and colouring in a caterpillar and a butterfly, to actually be able to go out into the garden. And I really encourage children, you know, to observe. Observing our environment is such a powerful skill to be able to have. You know, so children can go out and see what butterfly eggs look like, and then they can actually sort of be a part of that process of watching a butterfly, watching that egg develop and turn into a butterfly, and then allowing that caterpillar to actually, you know, eat some of the leaves and just, you know, I think
watch nature actually happening in front of them. Absolutely.
And we've lost that sort of aspect of nature that we really need to share. You know, not only share amongst ourselves. So
children can take that foundation away and then build on that as they go through the rest of their schooling experience.
Definitely. So not only share with each other, but also share with nature in general. That's what you know. There is enough for all, for everybody to share, including the little creatures that might be in our garden. Great. The other thing that I guess gardening also provides are lots of other skills that you might not really consider necessarily important.
I didn't think before when you were talking, I mean, I thought about the fine motor, but I didn't really think about the gross motor before when you mentioned that. I thought that was quite interesting.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they can also learn skills like patience. I mean, you know, you can't hurry nature. And for children to be able to experience planting a seed, a carrot seed, for example, or a tomato seed, and then watching that full process of that plant growing and then you being able to harvest it, that might be 5 or 6 months. And today's world is very hurried. Children, you know, are quite quick to be on to the next thing, and to, you know, so it's really important that they learn to develop that patience, and gardening is so wonderful to be able to do that.
Absolutely. It's nothing better than seeing children come out day after day.
No, exactly. It's so exciting. And gardening also really promotes that sense of responsibility and of ownership. And also that, you know, that wonder of nature and what's going on around them in the garden. It's just really beautiful to see.
And I think when they start seeing that in the kitchen garden, then they might look outside the kitchen garden. They might see it where they're elsewhere. That piques some interest to go to a farm or to go and see, you know, things elsewhere, and then be able to see the end process when they're at the supermarket and maybe try something there. Or we made that. we grew that and it tasted better, or it looked different,
definitely.
et cetera. So I think sometimes as well, the supermarket, everything looks perfect, whereas you're saying homegrown things and things that have been grown in the kitchen garden don't always look perfect.
Yeah.
It's not a beautiful, round tomato, for example. So I think that's, that gives...
it's really important to challenge people's views on that. So, the fact that a carrot doesn't have to be long and straight, it can have legs, but it's still perfectly edible, and, it can be really fun for children to see as well.
When you pull it out, it's got dirt on it.
Yeah,
It
definitely.
actually needs to be washed first. I think that's really...
So some of the best experiences in the garden have been in harvesting things that are under the ground, so things like those rainbow carrots. And, what better way of learning about your colours, but also, really the full life cycle of that plant to that seed to plant, seed to sort of carrot, coming back into full circle when you're there with the children and you're pulling the carrots out one by one and you're guessing what colours are going to come, to be pulled out.
And then I think some of those older children being able to communicate that with some of the younger children. This is what we did, and maybe they took some photos so they can use their technology to show this is what we grew, and they can share that with the little ones. And then as little ones grow up, they can also grow things. That kind of communication.
Yeah, definitely. Even children as young as, little toddlers as young as, 1 or 2 years can be digging in the ground and searching for carrots and pulling ripe tomatoes off. And, there's nothing more joyful than being able to harvest a strawberry that you have watched ripen. It can be so challenging to have that patience. And I mean, my boys learnt their colours through being in the garden. You don't pick the green tomatoes. Let's taste a green tomato. Let's see what that tastes like, as opposed to, what it tastes like when it's beautifully ripe and, probably still warm from the sun.
Amazing.
Yeah. One of the things that I would love to share is just how gardening is able to bring children back into the simple joys and the simple pleasures. And I remember one morning in particular when I was working in the nursery school, where we had pulled out the hose and we were just going to give the children a turn hosing. And it was quite early in the morning and we just turned on the hose just ever so slightly, and there was this beautiful mist coming out of the hose. And for a lot of children, what I realised in that moment was that this is probably the first time these children have seen, probably held a hose, let alone seen the effect, the glistening of the little, the water drops in the morning sun, and with that, how it gets that little rainbow. And just to see their delight and wonder and joy on their faces was just so beautiful. And so there's many, many, many moments like that within the garden that are just really powerful, and that children are really not able to get from any other experience.
So thank you so much, Maree, for joining us today on the pod. We really look forward to working with you. The Wishing Tree really looks forward to working with you moving forward to see you make these kitchen gardens come alive in our centres.
Thank you, Mel.
And here come the legals. Our podcast is purely brought to you for educational and entertainment purposes. We are just two hectic mums, and we are certainly not licensed therapists.
This podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of licensed or qualified professionals. And if you do need some help, please seek out some professional advice.